Hello everybody and welcome back to another revised video. Today we're going to be tackling a very important question that is featured on Biology Paper 2, and it's really important because this tests your knowledge more than any other question really will. Because unlike what many believe, this is not just a comprehension question. In fact, there's very little to do with comprehension in the question. Most of it is just testing your knowledge and application skills. And that's something you can learn overnight. So it's going to test everything you've learned so far in biology. So it's really going to test how well you've revised. But as always, there's ways that you can practice for this. And the best way to practice for this is doing past papers. So today we're going to be doing this 2022 paper, 2BR. I chose this one specifically because I wanted to choose one that isn't too easy. I thought that if I showed you the 2B one of this corresponding year, it would be a bit too easy. So one that's a bit difficult, but one that is still will still test you, right? And I just want to show you how some of these answers, how you would structure your answers, and how a lot of the answers are derived from questions like this. So let's go straight into this. And right away, I want to just tell you my first tip. Now, this is not a tip, it's a personal preference. But what I'm going to say is that these texts are very long. And when you're starting your paper 2 for biology, a lot of people are stressed. I mean, it's a triple paper, it's supposed to be quite difficult, and you're not thinking in the right space. And this is your question 1. A lot of the time, you're not going to absorb all the information as soon as you read it right away, right? You just started revising like minutes before, you've done your last minute revision, and that information's still kind of fresh in your head. So you want to tackle questions, right? You don't want to read this large chunk of text. Now, some people would prefer to read the text and they'll understand it immediately. But for me, I personally like to go straight to the questions because, as you can see here, they actually indicate what lines is relevant for each question you're supposed to do. Now, the nice thing about this is you can just look for that, and then usually it's pretty easy to find what the context of each line is just by reading the 2 lines that is involved. But I will say that's my personal preference. If you guys want to read the whole thing before you start it, feel free. I'll just show it now. Pause if you would like to read it. And there. Just have a read if you would like to before we start. But for me, I'm just going to go straight in to show you that it is possible to answer this without reading it beforehand. So let's look at question A. Explain how cross-pollination can lead to an increase in genetic variation, lines 2 and 3. Let's have a look at lines 2 and 3. So we have plant to plant. So when a question, this part of the sentence ends, right? This part of the sentence is the end of this sentence. So just to get context, it's not a waste of time just to read the previous sentence. It's always just helpful to get the context. So let's see. Flowering plants reproduce using different methods to transfer the pollen from plant to plant. The cross-pollination enables plants to produce offspring that show genetic variation. Now, what you may notice is this doesn't help us answer the question. It shows us what the question is referring to, right? But the question at the end of the day is answered by us solely, and that's what you have to realize. This is not a comprehension. A comprehension requires us to pick up stuff from the text and use it in our answer. Well, you might have to do that for some of these questions, but most of them, it's your own knowledge, and you just have to apply it to the text. So, let's have a look. What is it asking for? It's asking how cross-pollination can lead to an increase in genetic variation. So, what is cross-pollination? We know cross-pollination is pollination between 2 different parent plants, a cross between 2 different species, or just the same species, or 2 different plants within the same species. So that's already one way they show variation. It involves a cross between 2 parent plants, right? These 2 plants don't have the same genetic material. They don't have the same DNA, the same genetic structure. So their offspring is going to have variation, right? So we can say these different plants produce different gametes. These gametes have different genotypes. Remember, genotype is to do with the genome, the genetic structure, right? Whereas phenotype is to do with the characteristics expressed by the gene, right? So these gametes have different genotypes. So genotypes, and when they combine during fertilization, an offspring with variation is born. And that's just a simple answer. It's 2 marks. Realistically, you only need this part to get 2 marks, but it's always good just to make sure your answers are coherent and make sense. So yeah, question, we didn't read it and we were able to do A. So let's see if we can do B. Explain the advantages of the seeds germinating away from the parent plant, line 8. So even without line 8, I think we all could answer that question with our knowledge about plants. But let's have a look at line 8 just to be safe. So let's see, line 7, line 9, line 8. This seed dispersal means that seeds producing new young plants will germinate away from the parent plant. Okay, I mean, it just talks about what it's referring to in the question, but it doesn't give us the answer. So what is the answer? Well, we know that one benefit is that the seeds will face less competition for light. Actually, I misspelled. For light, right? That's one thing. And what else does a seed need to grow? Why would seeds germinating away help? Well, less competition for mineral ions. We can name something here like magnesium or nitrates. We don't have to. Mineral ions is always sufficient to get a mark. And finally, I think you could all guess it, and less competition for water. You don't have to say this exactly. You can say so they can get enough sunlight, so they can get enough mineral ions, so they can get enough water. There's always many variations to say it, but one thing to note is if you say less competition, you're not going to get 3 marks. You're probably going to get 1 mark, right? Because you're not quantifying what the competition is. You need to say it's 3 marks. You have to be specific, so make sure you're looking at the marks. That's the greatest identifier to see if your answer is detailed enough. All right. Now, give one advantage of the seed germinating close to the parent plant. So yeah, that's just really testing our knowledge. So let's look at 11. 11 says, although some of the fruit may roll away from the parent plant, most remain close to the parent plant, right? So what is the advantage of a seed germinating close to the parent plant? So let's think. So if the parent plant was able to grow, the conditions that it's in must be suitable for growth, right? So if it grows close, it can safely grow in suitable conditions. Right? That's one answer, one way to think about it. Another way of thinking about it is the same conditions as the parent. Because if the parent plant was able to grow enough to produce offspring, surely the offspring would thrive in the same conditions, right? Disregarding competition. Yeah? And then finally, you can say, this may be a bit confusing to understand since it's a parent and a parent plant and a child plant. You won't think of it this way. But it actually allows the seedling to have another plant to cross-pollinate with. It can cross-pollinate with the other plants there or even the parent plant. Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch. I wouldn't really go for that one. Just say it can safely grow in suitable conditions. That's a really good answer because the parent plant was able to grow. So if the offspring goes in the same conditions, it's able to grow as well. Next up, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about in that a lot of the times the whole text is kind of useless for you. And this is the perfect example. Explain the conditions needed for seed germination. Nothing at all to do with the text. They don't even give us a line reference to look at. We just need to know about seed germination for this one. So let's think. What do we need for seed germination? So we know we need warmth, oxygen, and water, right? But it says explain the conditions. So why do we need it? So let's go one by one. Oxygen is needed for aerobic respiration. Simple, right? Simple. First point done. Okay? Then water. Water is needed to mobilize enzymes. That is the simple definition. If you've learned about seed growth, you will know that when a plant obtains water, without water, the enzymes are what you call immobilized. The enzymes have no function. But in the presence of water, they become mobilized, and the plant can use them the seedling can use them for chemical reactions. And finally, the last one I mentioned is warmth. Warmth needed for optimum temperature for enzyme action. And also, another point that I forgot to mention is light, because light to break dormancy. Light, you can also say to, how would you say it? You could also say to promote growth, right? Light and seeds, the terminology is a bit vague. You can say many things, but don't say light is needed for photosynthesis because it's a seed, right? There's no leaves, no chlorophyll. It's not photosynthesis. It needs light to stimulate the growth. And this may be a bit confusing to understand, so I suggest these three are really important. Remember, with seed germination, oxygen, water, warmth. Just remember that and you'll be fine. Next up. Explain why some seeds are surrounded by a brightly colored and sweet-tasting fruits, line 13 to 14. Let's see. This may be because seeds are surrounded by a brightly colored and sweet-tasting fruit. Examples of this are soft fruits such as strawberry and hard fruits such as an apple. Once again, it's not going to help us answer the question, but it provides us context. And one thing I'll say is I've gone on and on about how useless the text is, but sometimes the content of the text is something you won't understand. Luckily, the content of this text is pretty easy to understand. It's about seeds, it's about germination, right? We already know that. Sometimes it's about something that you have no idea what it's about. So when it's about that, you will need to read the text to get an understanding of it. But this one is just a general example, so you'll be fine for this one. All right, so explain why it has it. Well, we know why it has it, because to attract animals, right? Bright colors are easily seen, yeah? And sweet taste is attractive, yeah? And why does it need that? Because it's asking explain, right? So why do they want it? So they want it for pollination. They want it for spreading their seed dispersal, right? But actually, that's not what the question is asking us for. Because it's asking why some seeds are surrounded. So how does it actually involve seed dispersal? So we say the animals eat the fruits containing the seeds, aiding the plant in seed dispersal. Perfect. Yeah, I mean that's as much in depth as you can really go for 2 marks. Pretty good answer right there. All right, 1E. Large numbers of tomato plants are often found growing in the sides of drains and setting beds on sewage farms, and suggest a reason for this observation. Now, this one, once again, this one has nothing to do with the text we've just read, but it is quite difficult to think about because you might not realize it, right? So, an answer that wouldn't be crazy to think about, to say, is that like a lot of people might assume that it's due when they read sewage, right? You might assume it's something to do with the high nitrate level in sewage farms promoting the growth, right? And that's not an absurd claim. I mean, it's pretty reasonable, right? But you have to think about why tomato plants are on the sides of drains. They don't naturally grow there, right? Which means the seeds must have gotten there, right? So how are the seeds getting there? And the way they actually got there is from undigested seeds from human feces that were ingested. This really tests your critical thinking, and this is quite one of the harder questions. Luckily, it's only 1 mark, but yeah, I hope you guys can understand that, because tomato plants don't naturally grow there on sediment beds, right? So you have to wonder how did the seeds get there? The seeds got there because humans can't digest the seeds of tomatoes. So when we ingest them, they pile up near the sewage plants, and then in the presence of high nitrate content and water, they're able to grow, they're able to flourish. All right, F. Give the reason sunlight is needed for lupin seeds to be dispersed. 21 to 24, let's just have a look at that. 21 to 24, 21. Some plants provide seed pods with a mechanism that ejects the seed from pod by force. All of these rely on the evaporation of water in the seed pod, so this method of seed dispersal usually takes place in sunlight. Examples of plants using this form of seed dispersal are gorse bushes and lupins. And now, the question is, explain why sunlight is required for seeds to be dispersed. Now, this one actually is one of the few questions where we actually need the text, right? Because I'm sure you learned about explosion as a method of seed dispersal, but you didn't learn about it, how it actually works. So this is actually how that form of seed dispersal works, right? The evaporation of water in the pod, so this method of seed dispersal takes place in sunlight. So how do we relate this to this? So we know that the water needs to evaporate in the pod. So what does sunlight do to help the water evaporate? We can't just say why sunlight is required. We can't just say evaporation of water, right? How does sunlight help evaporation of water? Provides heat to facilitate the evaporation of water. And I hope you guys can understand that. this question we really did need 21 to 24. So make sure to always read it. I know I've put an emphasis on how sometimes you can go without reading the text. But at the end of the day, you need to read it every time because there's always could be a piece of information that you haven't found out yet. So always read it. We needed 21 to 24 to answer this question. All right, next our final one. And well, question one was 16 marks. So yeah, really important that you guys nail this question in your paper. So let's see. Describe an experiment how you could carry out to investigate the presence of fluff on dandelion seeds affects how fast they fall, 30 to 31. Okay, let's just have a look. That's a bit confusing to read, but these include various sorts of fluff that increase the surface area of the seed so that it can be picked up by the slightest breeze. Okay, so fluff on dandelions, I'll just pull up here. This is what you call fluff on dandelions. I hope you guys know this, right? And it's talking about that basically, if you just want to image in your head. So this is just a simple 3-mark design the practical. You don't really need to use chromes for this one. It's only 3 marks. You just need to go through it logically, right? Don't be scared because just because you don't know much about dandelions, just don't be scared. So first up, we got to measure the time each dandelion takes to fall. So how are we going to do that? Use a stopwatch, right? Use a stopwatch to measure time taken to fall, right? Then we got to ensure some kind of control, right? So ensure the dandelions are dropped from the same height, right? There's a control variable, okay? We have a control, we have that, but what are we missing? Oh, repeats. We need a repeat and average, right? Mention that. I'm writing this in bullet points, but you guys have to structure your and response coherently. Sometimes examiners don't appreciate when you just write your text in incoherent sentences that don't have any structure to them. So I recommend writing a flowing methodology. Now, what else do we need? So we need to ensure one more kind of control because we know that the seeds are dropped from the same height, but what more controls can we use? So we can say the seeds are, use the same type of seeds. Yeah, perfect. Use the same type of seeds. Species, mass, whatever you want to say. I mean, there's many same type of seeds works enough, right? You say mass seeds, same species. I mean, you can, there's loads of things you could say, right? And by the way, this would have gotten us marks already. I'm just trying to think of extra things you can say in case this question has more marks. Oh yeah, so we mentioned our dependent variable, but one thing I need to mention is independent variable, right? So use different amounts of fluff for each dandelion, right? Amounts is a really bad word. Mass, different masses. Just a word of advice, don't use amounts. Amounts will quite often get you points deducted. It's just not a good word. It's too vague. Masses of fluff, a bit better. But this is more than enough marks. I mean, this question is really easy. You guys should be able to get this. And that's it. I mean, that's the question 1. Next up, we go to question 2. And this seems like a Nephron question. Pretty easy. Loop of Henle, glue, PVC, PVT. Oh yeah, pretty easy question. And yeah, after you get question 1, it'll really like boost your mood if you get this question, if you nail this question. So yeah, just I recommend doing more past papers, doing as many as you can. But I hope you understood like that how you would answer some of these questions, and how that even though sometimes this may feel unimportant, it's always important to read the text because it can really save you. It really saved us on this question about evaporation of water. We would not get this if we did not read the text. So yeah, that's it. If I have time, I will be attempting to upload some more videos about this type of question. But IB is quite a lot right now, so I will see. However, hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is RevWise production, and I really hope you learned something today. Please leave a comment to what you would like me to make a video on next. And yeah, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time.